Hi, I'm Tom Myers, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Anatomy Trains Technique series of videotapes. These tapes are designed as a memory aid for any of you who have been in my classes before, and would also be suitable for any manual therapist who wants to add fascial plane release techniques to their structural repertoire. These tapes are specifically designed to give you the feel, the kinesthetic feel of these fascial and myofascial releases, and as such, they come with a few cautions and a few suggestions. The first caution is that these tapes are long on technique, but short on both anatomy and assessment. In terms of the anatomy, we covered this in tape 2 of this series, the Anatomy Trains Overview. It's also covered in my book on the anatomy trains. Well, if you don't have either of those, you can follow along with a good anatomy atlas of your choice. Though we will do a little bit of assessment with each tape, the judgment of when to use each of these techniques is really left to you. You can get more help with the assessment in the Anatomy Trains book, again, or in tapes 3, 4, and 5 of this series, or by attending any of a number of structurally oriented classes, such as those we offer at our kinesis school. Believe me, I am very aware of the limitations of trying to teach these techniques, which rely on your kinesthesia and your sensitive perception in the body via a medium which is totally visual and auditory. To ease this, we have created a kind of classroom situation in which you'll see me demonstrate the techniques, but you'll also see a student imitating the techniques, and the client comments on how we get there. I think this will make it easier for you to recreate the feeling of these techniques. Though we will be showing you the techniques in some detail, we're not interested in your slavishly imitating them exactly as they are on the video. These are, call them templates for techniques. They can be applied in different ways to suit particular clients and particular problems. Once you get the feel of the technique, you can work creatively with it to apply it in many different ways. And we hope that's what you'll do based on what you see here. For ease of learning, we're going to start at one end and work our way up to the other. In practice, this may be the way that you work. It's an okay way to work, but it's certainly not the only way to work by any means. You might start with an area that is particularly held or particularly tight or short and work out along the line and in both directions from there, and then return to this difficult area toward the end of the session. So what we're going to show is a way, but not the way, of approaching this myofascial meridian. We hope that you enjoy and learn from these videos. Of course, we'd love to see you in a class also, since the learning is often better face-to-face and hand-to-hand. But let's see what we can do with this electronic medium. So from the inside and the outside edge of the foot, the lateral line goes behind the ankle, up the leg on the peroneals, up the outside of the thigh on the iliotibial band, crossing the waist with the abdominals, the ribs with the intercostals, and the neck with the splenius and the sternocleidomastoid, all together forming a basket weave on the outside edge of the body. Okay, with those general considerations in mind, let's get down to the specificity of the lateral line in the human being. We're going to review the anatomy briefly. The anatomy is more thoroughly reviewed in tape 2 of this series, the Anatomy Trains Overview. But now let's just look at the tracts and stations that comprise the lateral line, the stations being the muscle attachments and the tracts being the myofascial soft tissues that run between them. Our first station is on the medial and the lateral side of the foot. You can see at the base of the first and fifth metatarsals, the peroneal tendons coming across the foot around the outer part of the ankle and then up the lateral part of the leg. This peroneal muscles in the lateral compartment comprise the first part of this line, and there are fascial divisions on either side of the peroneal compartment as well, and we'll consider those. That goes up to the fibular head, and from here we have the anterior ligament of the head of the fibula, which you can see jogging over to the iliotibial tract, which I'm sure you're familiar with, going up the outside of the leg, getting wider as it goes, and including the tensor fasciae lata and gluteus medius and part of the gluteus maximus muscle at the top. From the waist on up, the lateral line does something unusual we haven't seen yet. It creates a kind of basket weave. We can see the external oblique going down and forward, or up and back on the outside, and if we took that off, we would see the internal oblique going up and forward on the inside. So together they form a kind of X between the hip and the ribs. And if we continue that idea of an X right up onto the ribs, the body does the same thing. It has the external and internal intercostals, which are having the same pattern as the external and internal oblique. And that carries all the way up the ribs to the top. And if we look in the neck, we find another similar X with the sternocleidomastoid on the outside and the splenius capitis on the inside, doing a similar pattern to what we saw all the way up. So what we see going up the side of the body is almost a basket weave of myofasciae that works its way up from the side of the hip to the side of the neck. Before we look at the significance, I just want to put in one other piece of anatomy which actually technically belongs to the deep front line, but we just can't consider the lateral line of the body in technical terms in the technique that we're going to be looking at without it. And that is, if we look deeper than these structures that we've been looking at, we would see the quadratus lumborum, which is, as I say, part of the deep front line and really deeper than these structures, but it runs from the hip to the ribs and certainly has an effect on lateral issues. And at the other end of the rib cage, we have the scalenes, which tie the neck into the top of the rib cage. These two muscles suspend the rib cage between them, in a way, and are very important in considering lateral shifts and lateral tilts in structural work. Okay, so that's a very brief review of the anatomy. Now let's think a little bit about the significance of this kind of braided basket weave before we go on to the techniques. But why would the body be set up with a kind of basket weave on the side of the body? If you look at how we motivate through the world, you'll see why the necessity for that is. If we look back to see how a fish motivates through the world, it motivates by wiggling its tail from side to side, which involves a lot of action in the lateral line, in the lateral muscles. And this lateral flexion motivates it through the world. We don't motivate through the world with lateral flexion. We motivate through the world primarily with extension and flexion. And the lateral part of the body serves to limit, the muscles on the lateral part of the body limit the lateral motion that our body takes. So in the hip, when we walk, the lateral line keeps this hip from falling off the femur, falling off the thigh bone, when this leg is off the ground. When we are walking and we don't want to have too much side-to-side motion of the ribs and hips relative to each other, this basket weave pattern keeps lateral motion contained while we are motivating by front and back motion. Another kind of interesting side idea about the lateral line is that fish have vibratory sensors all the way down where the lateral line would be. Humans have concentrated all that vibratory sense up in the ear, and we don't have vibratory sensors down our side. But it's just an interesting correlation with this set of structures on the lateral line. So what we want to see in the lateral line is adaptability, not the same kind of range of motion as we have in the flexion and extension. And, of course, we'd like to see some kind of relative symmetry between the right and left sides, even though we are right and left-handed, so it's never exactly symmetrical. So in reading, again, you can see more about the assessment of these lines in general by looking at tapes 3, 4, and 5 in this series. But just to give a general thing, when you see one shoulder higher than the other, one hip higher than the other, one knee more turned in than the other, or differences in the side of the chest, the space in between the arm and the chest, these would all be indications that there might be something different from one side of the lateral line to the other. Okay, so let's get started with the techniques on the lateral line. First, I'm just going to arrange Kathy's leg. We'll be switching back and forth between Kathy, Guy, and Mayor today with these techniques. I'm going to start with Kathy here and show a technique on the lateral band. This lateral band we considered actually as part of the superficial back line, but because it crosses this lateral arch here, it's not a bad place to start when you're thinking about the lateral line. So by putting my fingers right in on that lateral band of the plantar fascia, remember it's about a half an inch up, and I'm working out toward the edge of the heel and out toward the fifth metatarsal base. Just working out this way. If her little toe were short, which in fact it is, I could be working from the heel toward the fifth metatarsal base, or if the heel were pulled in, a la what we were talking about on tape 3, we could work it toward the heel. In any case, getting this lateral band of the plantar fascia open is a really worthwhile thing to do as we begin up the lateral line. Okay, Mary, give that a try.
Okay. So we're hooking onto the lateral band.
Yep.
And moving out with both hands?
Moving out with both hands, and you don't want to go beyond the edge of the bone there, so it's really just about 1.5 inches that you have to work with. All right, okay, try that again. Come on in here. And put one leg back. And so then you can, if you step down onto that back foot, you give weight in. Yeah. Does that feel different?
Yeah.
Does that feel different to you, Kathy?
Yeah, you're getting more of an initial hook.
And just let that spread. And that's okay on your knee, Kathy?
It's fine.
Great. So the first track of the lateral line is the peroneal muscles here on the outside of the leg. And because I'm going to be putting more pressure down on Guy's leg, I'm going to place a pillow under there and make sure that's comfortable for him. And the peroneals go from the lateral malleolus, from just behind the lateral malleolus here, up to the fibular head. So if I draw that straight line, that's where the peroneals are. So if I have Guy dorsiflex and plantar flex, I can see and feel what the tone state of the peroneals are. And there are a couple of ways of working with this. One is to spread the peroneals away from the center line by means of cross fiber friction. That's going to help lengthen. And I'm going to get better results if I get Guy to move. So Guy, I'm going to have you continue dorsiflexing and plantar flexing slowly. That's great. And down and up and down. And I could continue that kind of thing all the way down the peroneals, but to show another way, if I want to lengthen the peroneals down, I can bring my hand down this way while Guy goes up and down with the dorsiflexion. I'm using the flat of my hand, letting my hand conform to his leg. How does that feel, Guy?
That feels fine.
Within your tolerance?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm not interested in going outside Guy's tolerance. I'd like to stay inside the hedonic point, that point right between pleasure and pain. I'm not interested in going over the edge into the painful part. In other situations, as detailed on the assessment tapes in this series, I might decide that I want to go up the peroneals. So I can use a similar hand placement, but this time I'm going to go up the peroneals and I'm going to have him work again. Now, go ahead and point your toes down and keep it like that, and if we could come in and see this right up close. So when he points his toes strongly, we see a bulge of muscle right here, and a lot of people can mistake this for the peroneals. Here is the fibular head. The peroneals come straight down from the fibular head. When you see muscle bulging out, that's usually the soleus, and the peroneals are the tighter, harder bit in the canal right behind that. So now relax. That would allow me to work up, so I could now combine these techniques with a spreading and a lifting of the peroneals, again, as he gently moves into dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Good, so that's a variety of techniques on the peroneals, let's give Kathy a chance with that. So why don't we move up to the peroneals here and have you try a similar thing with the knuckles and just spreading the peroneals wide. The top is right here at the fibular head, this little knob here, so if you start just below there and work your way down from that.
And it's better to go down than up.
No, you can go down, or it actually depends on what's going on with their arches and their structure. So for right now, let's just go to the side. Okay. And just see if your shoulders can soften a little bit here. I'm old enough so I'm getting lazy, and I recommend when you're getting into this profession that you get lazy too. If you and the thing about being lazy is not that you really want to be lazy, but that the lazier you are, the more sensitive you can be to what's happening in his body. All right. So I think you're getting the technique fine, although you're going a little too far back. So let's try it right there. So you're going to spread with your left hand as well as your right hand. You feel that little piece, excuse me, that little piece right in there is what we're looking for. And the only thing that's missing is his movement. Okay. So remind him to dorsiflex and plantar flex with his foot.
Okay.
You feel the tissue. He stretches it, and then he uses it when he plantar flexes. He stretches it when he dorsiflexes, and he uses it when he plantar flexes. Great.
Feels much more effective with the movement.
With the movement, yeah. Yeah, I can feel that too.
If you wanted to work down, instead of doing that spreading thing, just bring your hand down the peroneals while she moves. Yep. If you had
This feels a little bit.
a fallen arch or pronated foot, you might want to be working this way. I'm sorry, Mara, it feels what?
I wonder if I did it like this instead, if I would get more.
Does that feel better?
That feels better on my body. I don't know how it feels to Kathy.
Yeah, it feels a little bit more effective.
More effective.
Okay, so you see Mare experimenting around and having feedback with Kathy about what works best, what feels as if it's really getting the release from the tissues. And that's the kind of experimentation I hope you'll have with your clients also. So the next track of the lateral line is a familiar iliotibial band here, and although some of you will be familiar with this, we're going to show techniques for this anyway. A reminder that these techniques are not good with oil, but are better with lotion, so I'm going to put a little lotion on the flat of my ulna here. I am not doing this with the point, but with the flat of the arm. And I'm going to start right up here at Guy's greater trochanter and putting another arm on his iliac crest. I am going to let myself sink into the tissue and start to move down toward his knee. I want to keep my pressure close to the elbow. I want to keep my speed commensurate with the ability of his tissue to melt. How are we doing, Guy?
Fine, it's fine.
So if I were to dig in more, that would get to the painful?
Yeah, you could go to where you just were, but probably not too much more.
Okay. So I'm going to have a dialogue with the client as to what his tissue likes, and a dialogue with his tissue about the speed that it can take the work. In any case, I will carry on right down to the outside of the knee in doing this. So I'm just going to make sure his knee is well supported here. There are a couple of variations of this. When I'm coming down with the elbow, I can feel beforehand and find, for instance, if I'm feeling guy's leg, I find that the back side, the posterior edge of the iliotibial band is tighter than the anterior edge. So if I want to loosen that, the forearm is like a violin bow, and if I turn the bow this way, just drop the elbow down a little bit, I get to the back side of the iliotibial band, and I could work down the posterior edge and give more emphasis to that posterior edge. Conversely, on somebody with an anteriorly tilted pelvis, I might find that this anterior edge is tighter, and I could go down the anterior edge by changing the angle of the violin bow, in this case, my forearm. The work is close to the elbow, but not on the point of the elbow. We're not doing work with the point of the elbow. That gets really upsetting to the vastus lateralis underneath.
Thank God we're not doing that.
Okay. Good. And one more variation here. If the forearm is too much, either for you or for the client, you can, similarly to the peroneals, do this work by spreading with your fingers or your knuckles, especially up right over the trochanter here. This is a great area to work with the knuckles. Again, as we were working with Kathy a few minutes ago, staying right on top of your arms and letting your weight come down through your arms is the easier way to go here, rather than getting behind your hands and working with your muscles. That will be more strain for you and for the client. Okay, Kathy, you try.
Guy, can I just pull up your shorts a little?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to play with is to bring you closer to your elbow.
Okay.
The more you're up here,
Yeah.
the more you have to work with your arms. The closer you are here, the more you can just lean on your arm.
Yeah. That feels better.
Yeah? Good. Okay, how's that feel, Guy?
Maybe just a little less pressure. Just a little bit. Yeah, right
Okay.
there.
So rather than making that pressure... Oh, you want her to have a little less pressure?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
How's that?
Yeah,
Great.
that's better.
I'm going to make another suggestion, which is put 1 foot forward and 1 foot back.
Matter which one?
Nope.
Okay.
So now sink in again, and then you have that back foot. You have a kind of rocker to keep your steadiness. If your feet are both on the same parallel level, you don't have that rock. So try it once more with that. So now if you push on your back foot, you lean more weight into your arm. If you come back onto that back foot, you take weight off your arm. You see? Okay. You see that skating? Feel that
Yeah.
skating you were doing at the end? Try a little lotion on your arm.
Yeah.
Okay. I've made sure that Mare put some lotion on her elbow before she started. If you use oil, you will not be able to do the fascial part of this work. At least so I would contend. And if you don't use lotion, sometimes you skate, and it looks like you're skating.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It feels like it's silky rather than gripping.
Okay. Maybe a little more is going to be a problem. Well, let's see. Okay. So she's bringing the forearm in to grip that tissue and to bring it down with her toward the knee. Yeah. And use your back foot to control how much weight you have. That looks good. How's that feeling, Kathy?
Yeah, it feels better this time.
Like I'm gripping in more.
Yeah.
So the next track up from on the lateral line as the iliotibial tract comes up, it comes into the tensor fascia lata, the gluteus medius, and the gluteus maximus. So I'm going to bring Guy's underwear up so that I can get to these 3 muscles. Here's the greater trochanter. I can either work up or down on these muscles, and since they're tough abductors, I am going to use the point of my elbow this time, and you can think of this as a kind of fan or radiating out from the greater trochanter in all directions towards the iliac crest, from the front to the back. The tensor fascia lata, the gluteus medius, and the upper part of the gluteus maximus. Depends on the underwear here. Sometimes you can bring this down this way, and again, working from the greater trochanter up to the iliac crest, from the greater trochanter up to the iliac crest. When you reach the iliac crest, you can just stop. Now, we want to add his movement into this. What movement could we have Guy doing? Guy, could you turn your knee in and out? So one of the things that we could do would be to have him rotate his leg, his thigh, in and out. Rotate in, rotate it out. Yep, that's great. And that helps me figure out where I am in the musculature here, and helps him figure out where I am as well. And the other movement that he could possibly use here, Guy, would be just to take your knee forward and back. And forward and back. Great. Either of these movements while you're doing this stretch here will help orient you and orient the client to what's going on here. Okay, Kathy, why don't you try this?
Okay. Guy, can I just roll up your shorts to get to your hip bone?
Yep, sure.
Good. So can you feel the edge of the trochanter there? Can you feel
Yeah,
Kathy?
where I'm starting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So your direction from there is up to here.
Okay.
Okay.
Going up. Okay.
So forward and up. We're not going
Okay.
down.
In that case, can I roll
Yeah.
down this way?
Okay.
Okay.
Either one or the other, and sometimes I even do it through the underwear. Okay. Now, for this one, we're really going to use the point.
Okay.
And if you sit in that muscle there, if you turn your knee in, Guy, try to have it kiss the other one. Do you feel
Yeah.
that muscle pop up?
Mm-hmm.
That's the tensor fascia lata, because it's a
Okay.
medial rotator. So now if you relax it, and you can either work from up to down or down to up, doesn't
Okay.
matter. But you're trying to get length into that muscle there and ease into the myofascia.
How's the depth, Guy?
It's fine. You could probably use a little bit more if you need to.
Okay.
And your next one back, right there, is going to be the gluteus medius. So if you want to get more depth, again, if you just step on your back foot and bring your shoulders up over your arms, you'll get more weight into your arms. You feel it?
Yeah, that was easy.
So it's not more strength, it's just more weight.
Do you need me to rotate the hip at all as you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's just getting herself oriented, but yeah, you can start adding either the rotation, yeah, or try adding just the flexion extension, just going forward and back. Guy, if you don't lift your knee off the, because as soon as you abduct, you pop her out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just forward and back on the pillow. That's it. You don't feel that you're being thrown out now?
I did a little in the beginning.
Yeah, but now it's better?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, good job. Our next section up here is the lateral part of the abdomen here, with the internal oblique angled like this and the external oblique angled above it. The station here is the iliac crest, and our next move is to clean off this iliac crest. And since there's sometimes some adipose tissue and gristle building up on this iliac crest, you want to feel your way down onto, if possible, the top of the iliac crest. And then you'll see that I am spreading both ways with my fingertips from the middle of the iliac crest out to the edge of the ASIS and PSIS, the front of the hip bone and the back of the hip bone. So how's that feel to you, Guy? Fairly burny?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. It's not surprising to have some burn going on here. I don't want it to be too burny. So if it's too much, I'm going to come back to the outside edge of the bone and just clean off the outside edge. Is that easier?
Mm-hmm. That's more tolerable.
That's more tolerable, okay. But as the outside edge becomes clearer, I'll be able to go right in and get to the top of the iliac crest, or eventually to the inside edge of that iliac crest. The external oblique comes to the outside edge, the internal oblique comes to the top edge, the transversus abdominis comes to the inside edge of the hip bone. It is possible to stand this way and work the iliac crest from above as well. But it's an area that will stand quite a bit of repetition of this kind of technique. Not all in the same day, but you can come back to it on successive days because there is often a lot of buildup of fascia which limits movement between the rib cage and the pelvis. So, let's give Kathy a try at this one. Okay, Kathy, take this on.
Okay.
All right?
Let's start on the outside edge.
Okay, so Guy, tell
What's that
Kathy, what's the
feeling
difference?
like?
Feels slightly surface. It doesn't feel like you're really right in there quite yet.
Okay, so I'm going to have you, and
Yeah.
instead of using them thumbs, you can put your knee right up there. Let's put your knee on the table. But try coming in there with...
On the
that's
top
better.
edge.
Mhm.
How's that depth?
It's good.
Yeah, you're still on the, pretty much on the outside edge, but
Okay.
don't stay away from his ribs. Stay on the edge of the, yeah, that's the way. You lean into it, you lean down against the hip. That's great. Good.
Okay.
Why don't we switch places and you try it from above?
Okay.
Okay, so as you come in here, you feel that bone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let yourself feel down in as if you're really taking the measure of the tissue between your hand and that bone and melting that tissue away. Sooner or later, Guy will have nice, clean bones without all this fibrous stuff hanging on to it.
How's the pressure? How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yep, but you're doing with your arms now.
Okay.
So, where's that back foot? Put that back foot way back. Oh, okay. You gonna change feet? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now step onto the ball of that back foot, lift yourself up over your arms, and lean in with your bones. Your bones
Better.
your bones is talking to his bones. Okay, so with Guy, I was showing you this technique where we moved this way along the iliac crest. I want to show you one variation of that and have Mare practice it, which is if you have an anterior tilt of the pelvis, where the pelvis is tilted this way, then the tissue on the top gets carried forward. So what we'd like to do is carry that back. With your permission, I'm just going to bring the underwear down a little bit so that I can find the iliac crest there. And I'm going to use the ulna Just use the edge of my ulna to bring the tissue back along the iliac crest. Is that within your
It's fine.
sensation satisfaction?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And you can bring that right back all the way to the PSIS, where the dimples are. Just catch the tissue, bring it back. Why don't you give that a try?
So does it feel like it's about the same?
Yeah, it does.
And so your pelvis is just turning around there to create your arm turning. Yep. You just drop that hip right back. Yep. So you're not working so much with your arm as you are with your whole body. That's it. Does that feel about the same?
Yeah, it does.
Good. You feel how that tissue's being sort of smoothed back along the bone? Yep. That's it. That's good. Okay, so our next track up from the iliac crest is the abdominal muscles we spoke of, the external and internal oblique, which cross here in an X. They're not strictly on one fascial plane, but they are very thin and function pretty much as one fascial plane. And my purpose here is to create space between the top of the hip and the bottom of the ribs in these lateral abdominals. Now, I do not want to press down in on the floating ribs. So, to lift this fascia up requires the same kind of scooping action that we used on the retinaculum in the superficial front line. So, to achieve that, I'm going to bring the whole surface of my hand down onto the lateral part of his abdomen, and I'm going to drop my elbows, drop the heel of my wrist, and lift the tissue up along the ribs. This is important not to push down onto the ribs. And I can carry this right up onto the rib cage, even though I know I'm going on to eventually latissimus or serratus. But mostly where this works is coming right up from the iliac crest, dropping the elbows, turning the hand to scoop the tissue up. What's that feel like to you, Guy?
That feels fine. It gets a little intense when you get just onto the ribs.
Mm-hmm. Tolerably intense, or you want me to lighten up?
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you notice here I just went a little bit wider. I started taking things closer to the anterior spine and the posterior spine, and same way, just lifting that tissue up. The key here is the dropping of the elbow and the scooping the tissue off, as opposed to pushing in on those ribs, which is not a comfortable thing for the client. Okay, Kathy, give this a try. Good, and just keep that scoop going of dropping the elbows and lifting it up. So as you're going up the body, the power comes from your pelvis. Not, you don't want to go above your hands.
Okay.
So it's almost Tai Chi. You're coming down with your pelvis to lift your hands up. Yep. Like that. And Guy, you keep breathing to keep some movement going in there. Yep. So how's she doing? Is she getting in there?
Yeah, it feels like she is, although about halfway up, she sort of loses the pressure a little bit.
Right.
Okay.
Right about
yeah,
there.
it got superficial about halfway up there.
Okay, so I can continue it up onto your ribs?
Yep. We're going to have another one for the ribs in a minute. This is primarily for these tissues down in here between the waist and the ribs. So let's see if we can just try this one more time with you. Really, again, finding that bone and diving down to catch that tissue. And then as you catch that tissue, then you go. That feels like it. How's that feel?
It feels like that first part is really critical, that you really got the tissue on that move.
Yeah.
Better than the last time.
Good. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. So our next piece up is the intercostals, and I'm dubious as to how much you can affect the internal intercostals through the external intercostals, or even the external intercostals through the superficial muscles over here. But you can affect them. I don't know if that you can touch them directly, but you can affect them. Here's the angle of the ribs, which you can feel very clearly on almost anybody. And what I'm suggesting here is by lining up your fingertips, all 6 of your fingertips in a row, you can settle your fingertips down into the ribs and begin to work the individual ribs apart from each other. And the action of breathing on the part of the client is the one that's going to help you open these up. In fact, yeah, I'm going to ask you to breathe right into your ribs, Guy. Sort of bring that whole thing up. That's it. So as he breathes, I might watch and see where do I not see the ribs fanning out in the way that I'd like to see them fanning out. If 2 ribs are sticking together like that, that's when I'm going to get my fingers down into the ribs and open them up. So, with his breathing and selectively choosing where I'm going to work, I could find where these ribs, here's a tight spot here right in the ribs, so I could just let my fingers sink down into the ribs, being careful of my fingernails. Is that all right, Guy?
Yeah,
You're surviving this?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. And I can carry that right on up. Of course, the farther up I get here, the more the latissimus is in the way, so I have to find these places where I can get to the ribs and help them open. This is still part of this whole lateral line here. I can help open this up. I'm not even thinking muscles now. I'm just thinking the whole fascial plane. My hands are spreading to the front and to the back. You can see my fingers are spread wide. I'm taking the whole fascial plane to open that. I can do that in time with Guy's breathing to make it even more effective. And that generally results in a feeling of opening of the breathing as well. The next technique that we're going to do is not strictly part of the lateral line, but it is freeing the shoulder from below, and it is definitely helpful to these lateral line structures, even though the muscles that we're going to be working are part of the arm line. This next technique is really good to have the client feel a before and after, since it's often so dramatic. So I'm going to ask Guy, I've got him lying right on his side. I'm going to ask him to bring his elbow right up the midline, letting his hand stay relaxed. And I'm going to say, notice how far it goes and how much effort is involved in bringing it there. Okay? So he has a sense, a kinesthetic sense of how much his arm weighs and how far up his shoulder goes. Because, not always, but often enough, this will produce a dramatic difference. So now I'm going to hold his elbow with one hand. I'm going to put my other hand into the back of his armpit, which of course is the latissimus and teres. And again, I'm using an open, soft fist, and I'm going to pin that down, more or less, against his ribs. In fact, I might even fold his elbow down over my hand, and then pin that down. Now, I'm getting old and lazy, so I'm going to get him to do the work. Bring your elbow up right along that midline, and the rub is I'm going to hold on to this tissue. So this is like a pin and stretch technique. Don't let your hand get ahead of your elbow. Just think about the tip of your elbow rather than your hand, moving up towards the top of your head. Good, and my hand moves slowly down away from his elbow. So his elbow and my hand are getting farther apart. And I'm going to do that a couple of times, maybe 3 times, but we'll just do it twice here. So you can see my hand moving slowly down as his elbow moves slowly up, right along the latissimus border or the latissimus teres together. So now, Guy, take that up again and see if it feels any different.
It does, especially up at the upper part.
So what's the difference?
Just less effort. It feels like more. It's just kind of floating up there. There's less being held down in here.
That's right. So before, he thought he was lifting his arm, but he was lifting his arm and his ribs. So as you separate and lengthen out the tissue here, he's no longer dragging his ribs along his arm, so what he's now feeling is actually the weight of his arm. So let's have Kathy try this. All right, Kathy, so you go ahead and set this one up.
Okay. So, Guy, we've already seen your range of motion. Is that about the right place, Tom?
Yeah, that's about the right place.
Okay.
Are you going to be able to push down from there? My suggestion is going to be that you cross hands and you put your right hand there and your
Use
left
this
hand
on
here.
Okay.
And have him come down over a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Is that pin about the same way? Guy, is that about the same?
Yes,
Good.
that's good.
Okay, so now you're going to lean your weight into your right hand and just guide his elbow up with your left.
How's that speed at which I'm raising my arm? Is that good?
Yeah, I think so. You want to lead with your elbow, right?
Mm-hmm. Now you should be starting to go down his body as he's doing that. So that's the bit that has to be coordinated. You feel the tissue pulling out from under your hand?
Yes.
Yeah. And as you get into the latter part of that, you'll just be coming down, not right down the side, a little bit more to the back. That's it. Yeah, you got it there. So try one right close.
All right.
Okay. And Guy, you keep your shoulder down as you bring your elbow up. That's it. And come down towards the back a little bit. And again, just lean your weight in there. Okay. Now let him do it again without your tender ministrations.
Okay.
Yeah, let him do the motion again
Okay, without anything.
Yeah. And he's supposed to go, ooh, ah.
Ah.
There you go. See, you got the
great.
right reaction.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to work now above Guy's shoulder and on the upper part of the neck here, which, as you remember, was the sternocleidomastoid and splenius, and every once in a while that levator scapulae sneaks in here too. So I'm going to position Guy's hand on his hip, and I'm going to ask him to roll it towards the back of your hand. And that's going to medially rotate the humerus here. Oh, that's a little bit too much. I want to medially rotate the arm until I see the shoulder start to roll forward. I don't want to roll the shoulder forward. So just medially rotate the arm. Oh, I start to see that movement, so I go back a little bit. Okay? That places the shoulder well for this motion. Now, I'm going to use my fingers and just spread from about the acromion out towards the deltoid, and I'm just going to spread this tissue wide. I'm going to be careful not to go too far onto the front of the neck. And as long as there's not too much hair that I am creating burning from the hair, you can work gently from the shoulder to the ear, spreading. The other motion that's good here, it's the same scooping, is along the edge of the trapezius, but you also get the splenius in here, is to bring the shoulder away from the ear. Again, I'm holding his shoulder down, and I'm reaching in with my hand, and by dropping my elbow and scooping up. And if the person tends to hyperextend their neck when you're doing this, you can urge them to just bring their chin in a little bit. So you see, as Guy brings his chin in, he keeps this nice and long. Great. All right. We'll give Kathy a try at this. Okay, Kathy, do you remember how to position his arm?
I think so. You're going to immediately rotate, but not as far as the shoulder. rolling forward.
That's it.
About there?
Yeah, somewhere about there. I sometimes tell people to put the face of their watch on their hip.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like that, spreading out from the midline along the body, and then take the next one a couple inches up. Right, and his shoulder settles down onto his ribs. Great, that's far enough.
Okay.
And the next one. Of course, you want to be careful there of not creating any brachial plexus stuff. Now that's a little far back. Let's try this right in here. Think about the ear as almost, or the mastoid process as the midline for this particular technique. Good, and somewhere up in there you're going to have enough hair so that he's going to complain about the hair pull. Great. And try the other one here with your left hand of, I'm sorry, your right hand. Use one hand to hold his shoulder down, and the other one to scoop the tissue down along to the shoulder. Okay, Guy, is that approximately what I was doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, very similar.
Great. You've got this idea of leaning into it now. That's really good. I can feel his shoulder sliding away from his ear. So that takes us up the lateral line, and we're going to add two more structures to this before the end game, which is the quadratus lumborum and the scalenes. Okay, so let's look at the structure that is, although it's not actually part of the lateral line, it is definitely involved in lateral discrepancies from side to side, even though it's really part of the deep front line. So we need to address it while we're thinking about this lateral line session, and that is the quadratus lumborum. I can't tell you how many people come to my classes and I say, well, touch the quadratus lumborum, and they go in here to touch it, because it's going from the top of the hip here to the 12th rib, but you can't touch it from here. Going through here, you're going through about 20 layers of fascia, all the erector spinae, the transversospinalis, and the abdominal fasciae coming around. So, not that working here isn't a great thing to do, but it's not really working the quadratus lumborum. If you really want to contact and work the quadratus lumborum, start out here at the side of the iliac crest on the lateral line of the body, go over the edge of the iliac crest onto the inside. When you're on the inside edge, can you see that of the iliac crest? If you walk back on that inside edge, you will feel, and Kathy now feels, yes, that piece of very strong fascia, and if you follow that up, that will take you to the 12th rib. Now, do you see how far forward in the body I am contacting that quadratus? Going in from here to contact the quadratus would be very, very difficult. So, to lengthen the quadratus, I'm going to come in from the side, come up against the quadratus from the front. Actually, I'm going to change my position here so I have a little bit better leverage. And right in there, do you feel that, Kathy?
Yeah,
yeah, doesn't that feel a lot deeper?
Yeah.
Yep. Now take a nice deep breath. Good. So I am going to, by dropping my elbow, lift my fingers along that fascia and stretch it. This is really quite deep in the body. I don't have to make big movements. Just small movements are enough. All right. So I want you to tell me if Mare gets to the same place. Okay? Okay, Mare. So to get into the QL, I want you to go over the edge of Kathy's iliac crest so that you're almost hooked on the inside edge. Yep. Now walk those fingers back along, staying in contact with the inside edge of the iliac crest. You feel that piece of fascia taking off, going up that way? Okay, so that's the outside edge of the quadratus lumborum. So now if you get your fingers just on the front edge of that and begin to stretch it up towards the 12th rib, you'll get a stretch on the QL. So Kathy, where is she?
You're feeling fingernails, aren't you?
No, they're not bad. I feel them. I'm feeling a stretch. It's not as much as
Okay.
Let Tom do it.
What I'm going to suggest to you is you go right in there and then hook backwards and see. There it is.
There it is. Okay.
Feel it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
You really have the feeling you've got a hold of somebody by the middle when you. And so do they.
Yeah.
They feel that way too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that you can do, Kathy, as a movement once she's there is you can take your hip away. Just lean this hip
down.
away. See how that stretches it?
Yeah.
Or you can
Shift it down, you mean?
shift it down as if you were reaching down with your sits bone like
Okay.
that. That's going to stretch
Yeah.
the QL. You can also breathe up with your ribs. Yeah, that's going to stretch it.
Okay.
What I don't really advise is taking the arm and stretching that because that stretches the latissimus and pushes you out of where you want to be. Okay? Great. Good job. Okay, Kathy, why don't you lie back on your back now? So we did the lower end of the rib cage when we were doing the quadratus lumborum. Now, as we do the neck work as part of the finishing up work for this session, we also want to include the scalenes as part of the neck work for the lateral line because the scalenes are supporting the other end of the rib cage. So both of these sets of muscles, the quadratus lumborum and the scalenes, are involved with the set of the lateral line in the rib cage, even though they are on a deeper layer of fascia. So since we generally work from the outside in, I would ease up the neck on the outside first, which might include some of these things. Taking her head in one hand, I could ease out the side of the neck, down the trap so. A fairly familiar move to most folks, I think. I also could work with the splenius by supporting her head in my other hand, reaching under, putting my fingers one on and one under the mastoid process, and bringing that tissue back toward the midline. There's a fairly significant amount of pressure on the underside of the head, but is that comfortable for you, Kathy?
Feels good.
Yeah. Leave them laughing. That's and the familiar stuff that we talked about with the other two previous line tapes, technique tapes, of coming up the laminar groove toward the neck and stretching out the suboccipital area of the neck. However, we're going to add the two scalene moves into this. So one would be the anterior scalene, especially in people who have breathing troubles or an anterior head posture. This one's a bit tricky, so watch carefully. We're going to start very gently down below the level of the sternocleidomastoid and slipping my fingers under the clitoral head of the sternocleidomastoid. I move in and I desist if there's any pain, especially nerve pain coming from the brachial plexus. But if you just very gently slide your hands in on the front of the neck, there is the anterior scalene. Where is the anterior scalene? Well, if you want to know where you are for sure, just have them breathe in. Most people will tighten the anterior scalene at the very top of a big breath. So give us a big breath. And there it is. Okay? So when I'm on the anterior scalene, I can just pin it gently down, again being careful about any nerve pain. And Kathy, if you just bring the back of your head toward me on the table. Slide the back of your head toward me on the table. That's great. You feel that stretch in there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. Okay, and relax. If there's side-to-side difference on the head, I want to get the middle and the posterior scalenes, and if I just rub my hands along the side of the neck, that most prominent guitar string on the side of the neck is the middle hamstring, and if you the middle scalene, and if you can distinguish between the middle scalene and the posterior scalene, you're doing better than I. The posterior scalene's just kind of tucked in behind the middle. So when I find the middle, I arrange my fingers like this, and I pin those two muscles, and then I ask Kathy to move this way. Move her ear toward her shoulder. Don't rotate at all, just Keep your nose right towards the ceiling, but do lateral flexion of the neck. Come on back, and I just pin those muscles down, and then I move her or have her move her. Just a straight lateral flexion across the table while these muscles get stretched. And although we're doing it on this side so that you can see, of course you'd want to do, even if you were doing more work on this side, you'd want to do some work on the other side. Don't just do this kind of thing one-sided, it's too much. So once the neck has been well integrated into what you've done in the rest of the session, and it feels nice and comfortable and easy for both you and the client, we can proceed to the last move that we recommend for this session, which is the pelvic lift. Okay, so for the last move here, to melt the lower back also into what we've been doing in the structure, let's bring Guy's knees up and keep his heels fairly close to his bum. And then I'm going to ask you to step down on your both feet and lift your tailbone up in the air and your sacrum up in the air and your lower back. I'm going to slide my hand underneath, and then you can just lower yourself down onto my hand and forearm. Great. Now, this isn't part of the move, but if I could just get you to turn to the side to show the folks back home where my hand is. I am on his lower back with 2 fingers on one side of his spine, 2 fingers on the other side of his spine, and no fingers on the spinous processes in the middle. So, having done that, I'm going to crook my fingers to hook the tissue here and bring that down underneath his pelvis. Okay. This hand could be on his belly. Every once in a while I find it necessary to put my hand on the knees to steady them if people have the tendency for the knees to fall apart, but it's really nice for people to feel the volume as I bring my hand down the lumbars, down the sacrum towards the tailbone. At some point you'll run out of juice and you can let go. The idea is to bring the tissue with you down the midline. Come on, and let's do this again. Great. Yes, and this is a move that you can do several times. The trick to this move is not to pull towards yourself. Let yourself right down, Guy. Right down on my hand. Full weight, that's it. And I hook my fingers, and I need to pull toward his heels, not toward my shoulder. Because if I pull him toward my shoulder, I'm going to turn him into a banana. I'll lengthen out one side more than the other. This is a nice move to finish with, and Guy may feel that even when he puts his legs out straight, that the lower back is more on the ground than he's used to. Mm-hmm. Okay, Kathy, give this a try.
Okay. Guy, would you lift your lower back up off the floor? And then just bring your weight down. Let your full weight rest on my hand.
Now your hand could be up as high as the top of his lumbars, or maybe halfway up his lumbars, depending on what you can reach and what you can stand with the weight of his body on your hand. Okay, so now begin to hook your fingers and begin to draw the tissue down toward his sacrum. That's it.
Okay.
How's it feel?
Felt a little lengthening. How's it feel?
It feels fine. You could probably go a little bit, even just a little bit further too at the end here, just to finish. Yeah, right
down onto the sacrum. Yep.
Okay.
Sacrum.
All right.
Underwear usually has a little stretch that you can get onto without embarrassing anybody.
Okay. And then do I ask him to lift up again to get my hand out?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
One thing about this is that you can use this as a homework exercise without the hands. Kathy, if I just have you step down onto your feet and begin to lift your tailbone off the ground and bring your pelvis up, keep coming up, keep coming up, keep coming up until your ribs start to come up. Now, lower this vertebra and then lower this vertebra and this one. as if you were laying down a string of pearls, one pearl at a time, and each time you're letting it down a little bit farther away from your head than it was when you picked it up. So by the time you get down to your tailbone, it's all the way down. Great. And you'll find with some people that what you have got is a clump of vertebrae coming down all at once where they just don't differentiate. And if you just keep doing this a little bit soft on the table, a carpeted floor is the best place to do it, because then you can feel each vertebra come down very distinctly on the floor. Well, that's great. That's it for the techniques on the lateral line, and we hope you've enjoyed this tape, and we hope that you'll take the techniques that are on here and adapt them to your own work and to your own way of doing things and to the specific situations of your own clients. This has been just a general approach to the lateral line, and we hope that it's been useful for you. Thanks for listening.